Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for another career chat. We have a very exciting guest today, Daniel Sierchio. He has a very broad range of some amazing things that he's done throughout his life. So we're very excited for him to be joining us today. Daniel, hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming. We're so excited to have you today, and we look forward to hearing about your life and what makes you you. To get started, I'd love to know about your career and your school and just kind of a little bit about your life and how you got to where you are today.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I'm grateful, like I said before, to the Columbus Citizens Foundation for the opportunity to be able to photograph the 2022 Columbus Day Parade. It was an awesome day for me. One that will hang on, being as so Italian as I am, one I will hang on for the rest of my life going forward. But as far as my career goes, and I believe it or not, I wound up making the National Honor Society in grade school amidst all the things or the craziness that went on in my high school. And I decided that, well, I knew at an early age, and like I was saying before, because on my block, there was a library down the block, and it was sort of a sanctuary in many ways. I spent a lot of time there reading and understanding, and I knew I wanted to go to college. So I graduated from Barringer High School in North New Jersey. I was a member of the football team. I decided to go to Seton Hall University, which was not far from me in South Orange. I could drive or take a bus there. And it was a Catholic university. I had spent all my years in public school, so I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But as I went there, and I think this is a good understanding, and I'm confessing to a point, I went in there and I think I was totally naive in understanding how to make it through college, because there was a lot more work and a lot more concepts you had to really pull together. And I was a little lazy. I didn't go to class, and I got pulled to the counselor. They did an analysis, and they said, you make a good accountant. So I went into accounting, and one of the things that was correct about that is that as an accountant, the accounting, as I learned, it was the white collar, blue collar profession, at least back then. Because when I wound up graduating and working in a public accounting firm, these guys worked hard, long hours. There were always deadlines, and they always rolled up their sleeves. So I went into accounting, and my grade point average changed because I worked at it finally, and I finally got through it. And in context, that what was unbeknownst to me when I entered, but I found out that at Seton Hall University, being a Catholic university at that time, I was required to get 12 credits in theology and 12 credits in philosophy, 24 credits combined, almost minoring in those two things. And the interesting thing is, as I went out into the real world, because I went across the river into New York City, what I learned, I know what an accrual is, but today I still understand the context of the ethics that I learned in my philosophy classes. So you constantly drew back on that, because the things that were going on in these philosophy classes were trying to understand who you were, like Descartes, I think, therefore I am, those kind of things. So you wake up in the morning, or somebody throws a book at you in public accounting, or you're late night, or trying to read a proof thing, you say, I think, therefore I am. You know what I mean? That's how I sort of got through it. And I know I'm making a little bit of a joke of it, but in certain respects, you have to stop and think about that. So I went into public accounting when I graduated. And one of the things that was interesting is that before I graduated, and I think this was one of the things I held on to the philosophy, my father passed away. So when I graduated, it was just me and my mother. And it was just her and I. She was the only one that really attended my graduation. I don't know why. It was just them. But I think it was a milestone for her to see her son graduate, you know? And I'll never forget that day, just her sort of standing there. It was a very long speech by a senator from Wyoming that took us through Western civilization for 2 hours, you know? I never forget. But I went out went into public accounting. I went out and spent 4 years in public accounting and became a CPA. It was very hard work, very blue collar work, a lot of tension, you know, and the stories that some of the things you see and how people can get tense in business situations was all happening there because we all had deadlines. The owners of the company were mad when we were telling them the truth, and somehow the truth maybe got kicked under the carpet. But nevertheless, it was a master's degree worth of learning there. But as I went along, and I became the treasurer of one of their publicly listed companies, and when I was there, they had a change of management, and I decided to get my master's degree in health administration. And so I went at night, so I would go to NYU in the city, you know, for the mat. They had a good plan there, and it was really cool because you go into, well, you're from the city. I was down on West 4th Street, you know, right by the village, so it was really cool to go down there all the time. And went to from there, I got a job while I was in school in several places, but one place out in Brooklyn, I was asked to install a budget and cost system for this health facility that really didn't have one in place. So it was, and this is one of the things that I talk to people about. I walked into that without worrying that I could get it done. I don't know why I didn't think that way, but I know what I did do is that I started learning what it was to put together a budget process. And I started from scratch. And one of the things that I think in my life where I do succeed, if I have a blank canvas, I succeeded when I didn't too, but like if I have a blank canvas, I can really put things into context. And that I was given a blank canvas there. And it really worked out. I was able to put a budget system together using, you know, the manual things and computers at the time, all really like, you know, coming together. Eventually, one of the issues that was there, and one of the issues that it sort of follows you throughout your life, and which I didn't understand in the big healthcare facility, is that the facility, it was too politically involved there. And I wasn't really good at the political end of it. And I got an offer from someone that I knew that had a photography business that was willing to sell, and I went into that. I left the accounting world and went into it. So I got my master's degree, and the next thing I know, I'm a photographer. And I spent 4 years doing a number of things, but much of it was bread and butter and photographing children while I was trying to become a fashion photographer. It was really cool. You're walking around New York City, you know, with a camera in your hand, and you could walk into like the Ford agency or Elite at that time, and they would have young girls who were wanted to meet their portfolio, and you would meet them there. You go out somewhere in the city and you use the lighting and take some pictures. It was really cool. I was trying to do that, but I ran out of money. To make a long story short, I ran out of money, and I wound up really, it's one of the issues where it really blew up my personal life also, to make a long story short. And I wound up eventually getting back into healthcare again. and I wound up using the skills I had acquired. Once again, I was required to go into a place, and basically, they almost took me off the street as a photographer. I went into this nursing home, and they needed to put another accounting system in there. I mean, I didn't think twice about doing it, and I went in and I got it done. It was once again where I said they had something in place. It wasn't entirely a blank canvas, but I got it done. And then I moved to another nursing home and went back and was using my CPA accounting skills and so forth to get that done, and I succeeded in that. But then again, my personal life came up, and I got married to a woman who was living in Pennsylvania, so I moved to Pennsylvania. Right now, I'm sitting in my house just outside Philadelphia. Great big Giant fan with the Eagles. Just beat them up pretty badly this weekend. I don't go out my door. No, but they're pretty cool. They know I am around here. I really tried to get a job in healthcare back then, and there wasn't. It was around when there was a recession going on in the 90s. And so what I had developed while I was working with nursing homes, like friends of mine were giving me clients, and I had a client in Soho in New York named John Delaria, another nice Italian boy, who was from Boston, but he was a very high-end salon and hairstylist. And he needed an accountant, so he was like my first client. And while I was in Pennsylvania looking for a job, which I couldn't, here's another interesting thing. I wound up meeting someone in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania from Brooklyn, New York, Milton Goldfeder, who was a CPA. And here, this story is great. Milton, who kind of took me under his wing, and he kind of helped me out there. He was in the Second World War. He was a bombardier, and as he flew over France, his plane was shot down, and he wound up parachuting down and being hidden by the French resistance.
Wow.
There were books around this thing. So I'm really putting this in the context of the people that were before me, you know, and how. And what they did in life. I mean, you figure out, you know, he was hiding from Germans who would have found him, you know, and maybe just, he was a Jewish guy, so they might have killed him right off the bat. But these are kind of the people that were sort of role models for me at the time. And as I went there and I wasn't getting a job, I started to develop my own practice. And I started in New York City. Because of John Delaria, I developed this niche practice of hair salons in like Soho, which was like a really a bit of an upscale fashion at the time. I think it still is. I don't know how. Back then it was, because there were people. I mean, I saw all these movie stars walking on the street in Soho. You know, Spike Lee, other actors that were walking around there. I sat Edie Falco. Remember her from The Sopranos? I sat next to her in one of my clients' salon.
Wow.
That's how, it was really a cool thing. It was really a lot of fun to do. I managed building up the practice around here. When I was in, there was somebody had a tax practice. He was retiring, and he did it part-time. And it wasn't a lot of money. I was able to really put the money together and bought his practice. So I developed the tax practice around here. And for the 20 years or so, I incorporated tax practice. And as I grew, I incorporated financial services as part of it. And it was something that, like I said before, it was something that I acclimated pretty easily. You know, growing up where I could, we always knew there was, in front of my father's store was Goldman Sachs. I don't know, I want to put this in a very different way. They were a bunch of men who were moving money. They were like the bookies. You know what I mean? And they were out there, And if somebody came in and somebody betting too heavy on this horse, they couldn't take it. The other guy had it over here. Somebody wasn't betting it. They would move the money around. They were like Goldman Sachs. So I kind of learned how to do that. And it was easier for me to step in and doing the markets because I understood how these guys were really dealing with risk. I hope that isn't too much for people to listen to.
No, this is all so interesting. Yeah.
I really developed the practice, and this is another thing. It was another thing that where you have to really, you get into the idea that you have to step out there and think of having a plan of something, thinking of that you got to be in the moment. Nothing is really etched in stone. You have to draw on everything that you can understand to really get to the next day. And it's interesting, if I talk about the fact that understanding how somebody can handicap a horse race is not that different from handicapping a stock. But one of the other things that was really important is that I had such a deep interest in history, you know, because when I started in college, I was going to major in history. And I would read everything about what happened at a time. And one of the things I remembered at the time was what happened when the market crashed that ultimately led to the Depression. So when I was looking at things, and every time, and I came up with the idea, and I would tell this to my clients, because I would tell them an idea, this is where we're going to move our money and put it in a certain position. And then I would say to them, I'm only as good as my last 30 seconds, because, you know, the market's going to change. And I always went with that idea in mind. Here's where we are now. It's going to change. We're going to move forward. And when something would go on in the market and somebody would sneeze to the left instead of the right, and the market would go down. Alan Greenspan said something one time, and poof, about interest rates. Poof, he had to take it back. The market went down. People were yelling at me. You know, I said, no. But I understood the context of it. And when I remember this very distinctly, because I had a lot of mutual fund providers that were around me helping my clients. And one of these providers was about to meet with me in my office. And this is when the markets were blowing up in 2008. And I go outside, he's in his car, and he's got his BlackBerry there, right? And he's looking at me, he says, look at this. And the Lehman Brothers money market went below $1. I looked at him and I said, it's 1932 all over again. And I was right, because you know who else knew it was 1932 all over again? Bernanke, the fellow that was head of the Federal Reserve, who was a student of the Depression. So Miles and I, the fellow, we knew exactly what was going to happen. They were going to have to put a floor to this by throwing money into the economy right there. So at that particular time, I tripled my business because I had an understanding of what was going on. And when people were moving or doing something, there was also, I managed to get a bunch of clients that in the middle of this storm that were, and this is something like your brother would say, you don't know when it's going to go viral. This is a viral thing. I had a friend of mine who worked at Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch was in the process of selling to Ambev. And what was happening at the time, that there was a contract in place, and these people all getting these buyouts, and I got a bunch of people on buyouts there. And because this contract was in place, the market was going to hell in a handbasket, but the contract was so in place that these people came out of it, cashed out at the top of where they were when the market was at the bottom, when they all reinvested. Now, you have to figure this out. You're over here, you're looking at the market going to hell in the handbasket. You know what this is, and you're asking me, and I tell you what to do. I think that's the concept of having a plan that I keep talking about, and having an understanding of who you were. I I mean, I know I was probably worried about how I would meet the next client or how I would get through this, but I knew that I understood where I was going with this, and it worked out. The and I don't know how important this is to people that might be listening to me, but basically I invested about $6,000 and sold these businesses for $750,000. Now, there were other people involved that never all came back to me, but this was like a kid from Newark, New Jersey, whose parents didn't even finish high school, but who understood, because of how he grew up, how you might get along, how you might really work. It was hard work because everybody, my father worked hard, my uncles all worked hard. The people that I worked with in public accounting, they were all yelling and screaming about business or something, but they all worked hard. You always had to have that hard work mentality, to really get ahead. I'm going to throw I'm going to drop this in here. One of my other idols is Vince Lombardi. Not only because he's Italian, but he said one thing: we're going to work for perfection. We're going to strive for perfection, knowing we can never achieve it, and be excellent as a result. And those are the things I tried to do. I had life is kind of difficult, so you have to walk through life with these things. The saying's right over here: perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can achieve excellence. Vince Lombardi. A nice Italian boy from Brooklyn, right? Then when I knew and like at the same time as I'm doing this, I was working hard on trying to understand Ansel Adams' zone system. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
Ansel Adams was the premier photographer at the time for his rendition of a print in black and white. And he had a methodology, and he wrote 4 books about it, which I have, and he wrote everything down. He let everybody know what it was, where he would basically understand when he was going out to take a photograph and looking at the scene itself, and it was a landscape photographer, and looking at where the light was or where the light wasn't, and know where that would be in his final print by the way he exposed it.
Wow.
So
the science.
I worked very hard on that, trying to do that, and I was able to, as I'm going along, like I said, 50 years I was an accountant. Over 60 years I was a photographer. I worked as a side hustle. I was working I think I made $100 in this whole thing for 20 years, But anyhow, I managed to understand that system well enough to I sold a printer too, and I got into some juried shows as a result of that. So, which was really made me feel really good about all the things that I was working on, and that you can work and you can grow, that you read and you keep learning. I mean, turning it around now, and I worked hard on this system because I was using the negatives, and it was really cool. I would go out with this big camera, and I put a thing over my head and looking through it, and you look through it, the image is upside down, and you're trying to register that and how it would look, and making a print out of it. So when I decided to retire and I found the Photo Art Center in Philadelphia, is that they were doing everything digitally, and I had to cross over to doing it digitally. And it's amazing how it's changed, and I had to learn. And you open it up and it's a blank screen. You know what the heck to go and what to do, but you work your way through it. YouTube is a wonderful place right now because a lot of people are on there teaching you how to do things. So I've been working hard on doing as best I can in Photoshop and Lightroom and Premiere Pro to be as good as I can what the time I have left and what I've decided that I want to do with the rest of my life. I think that anything else I need to cover. I mean, I went through the whole litany, and I got my resume in here. I'm looking at it, you know, and I think I kind of covered things. But
well, I will say accounting and philosophy were by far the most difficult classes I took in college. So I greatly admire that you love both and have been able to make such a successful career out of both, because to me it was like a whole nother language, and philosophy especially I've always been intrigued by, and the way that you talk about it is so inspiring to me. But when we start reading things, and I know the books behind you as well too, it's there's so much to it, and just like there's so much to life. So it's amazing to hear how you've been able to combine everything. And
well, one of the things is that and this is something that I was not like one of these where I grew up. Like I said, we had a lot of young men like myself and young women like myself that went to college. Across the street from me was Anthony Schiavo. Anthony Schiavo got like 800 on his college boards. I couldn't come close to that. He wound up going to Lehigh, right, University, and he graduated, went to the Harvard Business School. He graduated engineer, went to Harvard Business School, and wound up in Silicon Valley.
Wow.
It's really a good story. I was not as good at, I didn't have that innate ability that he had, but he also worked very hard. You know, he studied hard. And interesting thing about him, he wasn't a big guy, but he got 800 on his college boards, and he played football with me. He was a third string quarterback.
Wow.
I don't know if he ever got in the game, but he was there every day at practice. Mm-hmm. You know, you got to really tip your hat to somebody like that.
Yeah.
I never had that ability, but one of the things I learned as I go along, I wanted to really be involved with more complex situations. It's probably why accounting never was a real problem for me, or I was intrigued by philosophy and trying to learn more about it, because it is an understanding. It's how, like I said, it's an understanding about who we are and how we place ourselves in the world. You know, much to the, like what the existentialists were saying about the first and most important thing we have to understand is the inevitable. We're going to die, you know, and what do you do with this time that you have?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And something that I'd love to hear about too is, obviously photography has been a passion of yours throughout life. How did you get started in that? What did that look like growing up? And were you interested in photography growing up? I know you said you received your first camera at a young age, but just about that and how you were able to keep that passion while you were working and doing accounting things. I know you're in and out of photography you spoke about, but how was your heart always going back to that, and how were you able to maintain that? Because a lot of people lose their passions. So that's
as I look at the history of this and what basically happened when I first started to, like I said, my uncle gave me the camera, and a few years later I found out that my other uncle had this darkroom, and there was a part of our home where it was empty at the time, and I was able to put everything in there, and I started to developing my own photographs from that point. And I got really caught into it. And it's like everything that I've done, that you want to peel away the onion and understand why or how or what it is or how you can make it grow. So effectively, I went into my first marriage, and I had cameras. And I think what I was doing was, we had an apartment, and I would go back to where my mother's house was, and I would develop the film there, trying to print it. Now, I had to bring in all the water, no running water there. Then as we went along, we bought a house. And I remember, like, I had this house that was built in 1907. There were 3 floors to it. Wow. Eventually, my mother moved in to the top floor, but I made a dark room upstairs. I plugged all the equipment up there, and there was water where I could get back in, and I made a dark room up there. Then, as my mother moved in, then I went into the photography business. Down the basement was big enough. I made a studio, and I had a dark room there, and I had my office. And much of what I did was not in there. I had to go out on the road there. Then, what happened is that when that's my life personally fell apart, then I managed to keep all my stuff, and I put it in a storage space. And I went, and I had to get another apartment. I had to go commute back to New York, and get another job. And then I moved my apartment again. And what I did is I always brought my cameras, and I always brought my equipment with me. I had, up until a year ago, the same table I used on my darkroom was in this house in Pennsylvania. So I brought everything with me from Newark, New Jersey to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, down to Philadelphia. I always carried this stuff. I was always trying to take a picture. And at that time, also, you could do a lot with slides. And I was shooting more color than black and white. And so I kept shooting. I kept, wherever I went on a trip or something, I kept shooting. And I found places that could develop it for me. Then when I moved into this house, I made another dark room down here. It was a passion that I wanted to do more of. It was like, I can't, to this particular day, I can't, where would I be without a camera? That's the kind of thing. It was the one thing that I thought about that I would never want anybody to take away from me. I would never want to lose if I lost my camera. And here's one thing, I went on a job. This is when it was between, divorce. I went on a job in Chicago to shoot a school there. And when I went in there, I had to go up and down this elevator to bring all my equipment up. And I brought everything up there. I left it up there a day or two, and I finished the job, and I come back down. And this elevator operator takes me down. I have my bag of cameras there, and I have my lights over here. I said, bear with me 1 second. I want to pull this out. Can you watch this for a minute? I turned my back for a minute, went back, the elevator was gone. I go, elevator comes back down, open up the thing. I pick up my camera bag, elevator door closed. It's lighter. I waited for the elevator to come back down. I grew up in North New Jersey. Who's going to get me? I said, here's the thing. The guy comes down. I said, I'm not going to the cops. You bring me back my cameras. I walk out the door. Came back down, gave me my cameras.
Wow.
Walked out the door. I was desperate at that time. If I went to the cops, what would that do? Right? I'm not going to have my cameras. I wanted my cameras. He gave me the cameras. Said, thank you very much. I walked out the door.
Wow.
So that's how much it's been with me. And I'm going to where the darkroom was, right over there. That's where, I built the darkroom all over again. I went on eBay and bought enlargers. eBay is wonderful. You can sort of trade things. I can rent an enlarger, I sell it. I pictured this. I had this one enlarger I decided to sell. It was big, right? And I saw it on eBay. It said for pickup only. Some guy in Georgia finds this thing. I said, wait a minute. I have the money in the bank. I said, wait a minute. This thing, you're gonna come pick this up? He said, no. I had to go get a trucking company to come and take it. And he paid for the shipping.
Oh my gosh.
Let me tell you, that's only the beginning. Only the beginning, and how on what it was to really go through my journey. And it all resides in the fact that I grew up in a place with the context of every day you had to really be alert and awake you had a lot of support around you and can always get through things. So it was.
Well, these are great philosophies and amazing things to keep in
I'm
mind.
hoping that people that somebody young who would look at this and understand what the journey's all about, because as much as I keep saying you have to go down this one particular path, and the better one, the context I understood when I was advising people for business is that you have to have a direction. You have to go. There's always the short distance between point A and point B. You have to decide what that is. Granted, it's not going to always be that easy, but when it goes from one way to the other, how do you get there? Yogi Berra. When you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Yep. Yeah, but it's true. Yeah.
Well, my other favorite yogi saying is, "We're lost, but we're making good time."
Yeah. Yeah, but it's true. You know, life is difficult and everyone's journey is different, and it's easy to compare yourself to other people or get down on yourself about certain things, but it's all part of the journey, and we all have our different forks in the road, right?
Yeah, but the other thing is that, and sometimes when it comes out of me, and some of it what you're seeing here when I'm talking about it, we can't take it all that serious, you know. And there's times when I've taken it too serious, but I've been able to get through things when I don't take it too serious, that I know that it's just one little turn I have to make to go from point A to point B, you know. And you could look at it and sometimes you look at backwards at things and what you did and how they went wrong and throw a sense of humor on it, you know. Oh yeah, I did that. Well, you know what? That's just what it is, right? Let's move on. And if you can keep that understanding, that approach, it's going to help you, day by day in the long run.
It's true, and always important, and I think especially important in these last few years as we've gone through a pandemic and a lot of changes. A lot of us have had, a lot of different job changes or school changes, and even having to do school from home for a lot of our viewers, and those kinds of things are hard, and it's easy to get in your head and get a little serious about things, and as you said, take things a little too seriously sometimes. And of course we all need to at times, but it's good to remember that that's life, and there are a lot of amazing things that we all experience and a lot to look forward to, especially for our scholarship recipients. So
those participants and the people that you chatted with will have a lot to look forward to.
So much.
And they're all very bright people, and I think the future would be it's going to be good for them. And they're going to be looking at things and coming up with the same speed bumps that any of us will. And it's a matter that they have to, have a sort of a belief system to get through it. And if you know where you want to go and you know what's important, I think family is important. And some of the downtimes, one of my accomplishments during the times and really, being like a bag lady without the wheels, I really hung in there with my daughter. I managed to always be part of her life. And because my ex-wife took my daughter and moved her up to Westchester, Pennsylvania in New York, and then Westchester, New York. I had no idea where that place was, but I made sure I was there for her. And actually, when I was able to get a job in healthcare again, I got a job in White Plains, which was right next to where my daughter was. So I would be able to have contact with her. So that was one, I think that one thing, when you think about the importance of the people that were around you and the need, that they have to see that you're doing okay. That I registered it that way with my daughter and with my mother when she was alive too. So those are the important things.
It's true. It's true. And, family, especially being Italian, there's always Italians, right? The Italians find each other, and the support.
It's great being Italian. I'm telling you, man. I went to Italy on a thing. I'm yelling in the bus driver, Giovanni. Hey, Giovanni, it's great being Italian, Giovanni. I use some expletives though.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so wonderful to hear about your life story and like I said in the beginning, what makes you you. And thanks for inspiring us all and opening up to us. And we hope to have you back soon. And thank you so much. I'll put a link out to your website as well, maybe some contact information. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and if you have something, thank you so much. If something you need, I'm available.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.